Whether it's in the for-profit or nonprofit world, whether you're selling buildings or recruiting builders, the ability to tell a compelling story that resonates with your audience is the key to getting people on board. Kristi Villanueva knows your passion doesn't mean anything if it doesn't spark the passion of your audience. Welcome to BexarCast. I'm Randy Langford, and this is BexarCast, a weekly interview with business, political, education, and nonprofit leaders. We're examining the relationships between all four and how each one benefits from the success of the other three. Kristi Villanueva is a master storyteller. Whether it's advocating for businesses in her role as president of the West San Antonio Chamber of Commerce or serving on the board of directors of the Mission Heritage Partners, the stewards of San Antonio's missions, she uses her storytelling skills to persuade, provoke, and impassion those around her. Kristi brings more than 25 years of marketing, government affairs, and public relations experience to her role at the Chamber. She serves the community on the boards of Via Metropolitan Transit and the City of San Antonio Ethics Board of Review. She's also a former steering committee member of the city's Climate Action Adaptation Plan, along with other community and business organizations. Kristi, thanks for joining me. I appreciate you being here.
Absolutely. I'm happy to be here, Randy. Thank you.
Well, I especially appreciate it considering how busy you are. Oh my gosh, you're everywhere. And and that's what I'd like to talk about. That
Yeah.
involvement in the community, your role in the community. I mentioned it in your introduction, but there's just so much more. I can't cover it all. You've been in public relations and government affairs in lots of places, not
Mhm.
just with the chamber. Has that always been a passion of yours?
Well, so I didn't realize that was a passion of mine. How about that? How about let's go back to when I was in high school. I really thought that I was either going to become a police officer or a firefighter.
Wow.
And I was actually enrolled in a little place called Del Mar College in Corpus Christi.
Hmm.
And I was really set on this. I knew that I could talk to people. I knew that I could sway them. And then throughout the years, I remember a job where I was working with the United Way as a volunteer, and I would have audiences of anywhere from 50 people to 250 people. And the goal there is obviously to get them to donate.
Right.
So, depending on the type of audience, I would try to figure out, all right, do they have an extra 50 cents in their pocket, or do they have an extra $500? I would tailor my stories and my conversations to that. And it was amazing how many people would come up and say, was that story really true? Because it really resonated with my life or, my parent or something like that. And it really meant a lot when I received that feedback. And then by accident, in a different volunteer role, someone said, I'd love for you to help this festival. We're kind of in a jam and we need to grow. And it was called Bayfest there in Corpus Christi.
Right.
No longer exists anymore. But that really turned me on to kind of the tools. I started learning the mechanics of telling a really great story to be supportive of the issue. And at the end of the day, for that call to action, I never connected the two until I started going down this road.
Yeah, it's amazing how the right story can move people and put them in that place you need them to be. And it's
Yes.
interesting that you bring that up because one of the keys of Bearfest is pairing high school students with nonprofit organizations, and then the students create outreach media for that nonprofit. So we're putting them in the role of, like you say, of storyteller. They have
Yes.
to learn what the nonprofit is about and then tell that story in a way that appeals to people, that resonates with people. And that
Mhm.
seems very much like the role you're in at the West San Antonio Chamber of Commerce.
Yes.
You're representing small businesses and you advocate for them by telling their stories. Can you talk about why being a good storyteller is important in business?
Absolutely. So, especially with young students, I always make sure, or young, even college students, I tell them that sometimes when you go in front of people and you know that you have a passion for a particular issue, and you know that there needs to be policy change. Unfortunately, sometimes these folks in leadership are not quite listening. They're just kind of picking up the surface facts. And that never really translates into actual either legislation or policy change at any level. So that's why I tell them you really have to listen to what's important to that person, your audience. Obviously, we
Right.
need to know our audience, but you figure out who really has the control and the leverage as an audience member, and then you're going to appeal to them. The story that you tell needs to always be linked to what's important to them. Well, now they're listening. You
Right.
know, if you talk about their dog, or you link it to maybe a parent, now all of a sudden they have a different perspective and understanding of you, the storyteller.
They're suddenly
And then you
invested.
absolutely.
Right.
So, and it takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. But I realized that myself many years ago, where I was very frustrated. I felt like, well, it's because I'm Hispanic that no one's listening to me. And it's because I am a woman that no one is listening to me. And maybe that was true, but I really needed to hold myself accountable for the change that I wanted. And I still believe that today. I mean, now I'm 48 years old and still kind of trucking along to figuring out what's going to resonate
Re-
at the
re-
end of the day.
yeah, regardless of why they're not listening to you, it's up to you to fix it.
Yes,
You
absolutely.
can't expect the audience to fix it. You have to fix it.
No, that's
Right.
right.
And the other element of pairing students with nonprofits is that it creates a real world work experience for these kids. They're
Mhm.
the vendor, and they have their client that they have to provide a product for.
Yes.
As a business person, someone who's going to be taking a look at hiring these students someday, how important is it for them to get that real world experience?
It is imperative for them to get that real world experience as soon as possible. And I can tell you, I have two children. I have a 28-year-old son and I have a 16-year-old son. So with that 28-year-old, he actually works for an elected official. He's the chief of staff for a state representative. Today, he tells me, Mom, I am up against the best of the best in college students, people who have gone to, um, schools in California and New York and everywhere. He says, but you know how I beat them out? Communication every time. And he says, I'm just a South Texas boy and competing with the best of the best. But that communication, but I've been dragging him along to volunteer activities since he was about 9. And same thing with my 16-year-old. Right now, he is block walking on when he gets out of school, not only with his brother for the campaign, but he's also block walking for himself. So he is doing yard work. And I told him, no, Mom's not going to call anybody. You have to go do this yourself
Right.
and tell your story and share what your purpose is. But for these students, they've got to get out there in the world, take that risk, go take the part-time job. I know that you're not making $1 million right off the bat. And we need to make sure that the students have the expectation that you're not going to make $25 to $45 an hour today.
Right.
But even if you only take, the $8 an hour, look for that connection with your coworkers, look for opportunities to volunteer at a higher level, because developing your communication and making the mistakes today is much better than trying to make them when you're much older in life.
You're right on one of my hot buttons. You jumped right on top of one of my hot buttons, is that we want to give these kids, and you mentioned take that risk. We want to
Mhm,
put these students in this awkward, uncomfortable position deliberately,
mhm.
that you have to sit across the table from an adult who has
Yes,
expectations. You got a deadline, you
yes,
got a story to tell, you got an assignment to meet. How are you going to do that?
mhm,
And
yes,
I feel it's a value to have that conversation at 16, uh,
yes.
before you have it at 26, that you're going to be much more
Yes.
comfortable when you've had that conversation several times and you walk into a real client when you are on the payroll and you say, oh yeah, I've done this before, I've been here before, this isn't as intimidating as it was when I did it 6 years ago in high school.
Right. And it is, to an employer, it's extremely impressive to see when a student had took that initiative at between 16 and 18,
Right.
and you figure out, you start hearing those stories. Oh, I did work for a chamber of commerce, or I volunteered for this nonprofit, and this is what they taught me. Let me give you that situation. That's more important to me than how many words you can type a minute, or because there's so many things that we can develop the skill for that
Right.
specific job, but I can't build that initiative and customer service in that student or in that person. That
Right.
already has to come in set.
You can teach technique, but you can't teach character.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. And
Yes.
that's already ingrained. That ship has sailed.
Yes.
Yeah, I know you also specialize in government relations.
Mhm.
That's a big part of what you do. Why is that important? What's the connection between business and government?
So as we see in life, we do need to change policy, with between the presidential election and our local elections. There's so many systems that are outdated. There's not enough time to get it all done. But I have to be able to take that responsibility as just a resident of Bear County. And I need to be able to bring people together so we can work on that change and then teach others, like your students, to continue down that path, because there's so many policies that are outdated, so many laws that need to be tweaked in order to fit today's situation, but still benefit everyone, no matter color, creed, religion, otherwise. And that's a tough thing to do. So again, we go back to that storytelling. How, with the end in mind, how do we develop new and profound policy that will help advance small minority-owned businesses, that will help those entrepreneurs, that help provide freedom to create for everyone? So, as a matter of fact, a really great one is, we're working on the gas tax at VIA. There's
Right.
so many elements. Since I'm a trustee, I am helping to be supportive of that, along with renewable energy innovation, and combining those two things that you never thought would ever go together. That is the power, especially with these students. That's the power of creation and storytelling and development of new technology.
Right.
We all have a friend that understands computers or understands wind power or something else. Well, let's clear the path for them, because they're going to make our lives better at the end of the day.
And it's there's the it's the persuasive, I guess, the persuasive element of storytelling, that anybody can read a list. You can regurgitate data. Anybody can do that. But to take that data, create a story that resonates with people and make it persuasive,
Yes.
either for their vote, for their volunteer time, for their donation, for their support in whatever form that takes. That's the whole
Hmm.
purpose. Is I have
Yes,
I have a product here that I need to sell in one way or another, and here's how I'm going to do it, is through this story that I'm going to tell you.
that's right.
And speaking of nonprofit organizations, I know you've had years of involvement in the nonprofit world, like with Mission Heritage Partners, which supports and
Hmm.
promotes the San Antonio Missions National Park. A lot
Yes.
of your volunteer work seems to revolve around education. Where does that commitment to volunteering personally come from? What makes you volunteer?
So I knew that when I was young, because I didn't have experience, no one was really going to give me a chance to take on a particular job. So I received from one of my government teachers in high school. She was the one who told me, if you just, why don't you go and try to practice your skill? You have something, but it's not developed yet, and we don't know which way it's going to go. Just go volunteer anywhere. Start there, and then that'll build a connection to something else. And lo and behold, my teacher was right. because I met new people, and each person that I met had a different connection in the community. So some worked for the refineries where I lived. Others were police officers. My mother worked at the police department. I didn't know that I could become a police explorer. And that gave me a very different perspective at 15 years old, to be out on the street with police officers and understanding when you understand that view of life, that really changes the dynamic of things and how you connect and explain, because now you understand your audience is so vast.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it's just a great appreciation for education. And I know many of the students, and I know I said it too when I was young, I know how to do that. Oh, that's easy. I know how to do that. Well, it's not until you're older that you figure out, wow, I didn't really know how to do that.
Yeah, I remember when I was 10 feet tall and bulletproof. Sure.
Yes. And it's a great power to have, but we always have to remain open-minded to
Right.
say, we need to connect people. And that was my passion, is I always wanted to connect people. I always wanted to connect them to a resource, because I never felt that there's never a lack of resources. It's just what fits.
Right.
So I figured if I could just educate, but I don't want to educate as a teacher. I want to connect people to things. And that was my drive to say, oh, well, if you feel sad, this is what you need. If just want to be busy, this is what you need. And just go, that just grew into something that I believe is very amazing today. So with Mission Heritage, the reason I love Mission Heritage is not only because of the work that they do, but they actually support the trades. So, yeah, there are carpenters. Many of those folks that work there are carpenters and bricklayers. I mean, how do we keep the missions intact?
Of
There's
course.
repairs.
Of
So
course.
that's my connection. And then sitting on the board with such a diverse group, I've now learned to expand my thinking on other things,
Hmm.
because I don't want these students to ever think that, oh, I don't belong in that group, or I don't fit in with those people because they are smarter and more successful and more of this and that. Because you know what? We belong everywhere. I'm
Right.
just a little guy from a very small town from Corpus Christi, and but I have something to contribute that's
Right.
solid, and so do these students.
There's
So
always
it's a
going to
big
be
deal.
somebody. There's always going
Hmm.
to be somebody smarter, richer, faster, stronger, bigger. You
Yes,
you
but
can't let you
together we
can't
can
let that,
create.
yeah. You can't let that stop you. Right.
Yes.
So you've been on both sides of that coin, in working for-profit businesses and advocating for nonprofit organizations. Is there any difference between the storytelling? Is it one sales pitch is all?
You know what? I would have to say no. It's always about the audience, because in the for-profit and the nonprofit, many times you see the same people, and they have different connections. So realistically, no. I mean, the only thing that I would say that you have to watch out for is there's some policy issues, there's some background information that you need to know. The students really need to do their research, but that goes for anybody. No
Right.
matter what you're doing, you need to understand what the policies are, how that organization or that company governs, and then what laws apply to them. But doing the research and reading is the easy part. Then you have to step back and create that story to say, what do I want to do for this group? How do I want to enlighten people? Or maybe how do I want to bring the community in with this organization? And then the story just starts to develop.
Right.
So English is a really big piece in
Right.
this, and
Right.
English and government were probably my strongest points in school. But then I realized that everything else that I learned in high school, you really utilize it at one point or another.
All that stuff I thought was useless. Yeah,
Yes, it
you
really
know,
isn't useless.
maybe there is a practical use for geometry after all.
Yes, there
Yeah.
is. Actually, so I have to tell you, my husband is a licensed electrician.
Oh, okay.
And so sometimes we connect. Communication is a little tougher because obviously he's the math whiz,
Right,
and then I'm working on, all right, so how do we take what you're creating and put it on paper for people to read?
right,
And we get into some really intense conversations because I tell him, well, there's a lot of folks that don't get the math
right,
on this.
right.
But
Yeah,
but we work on that communication to figure that out and then translate it into something simple and concise.
right. And it's interesting that you mentioned the trades in relation to the nonprofit world. One of the reasons we created BearFest is to expose students for a significant period of time. They work with these nonprofits for months on their productions, and so
Mhm.
they get a deep, intense look at how a nonprofit operates from one day to the next. What we found was most high school students don't realize there are paying jobs in nonprofits. They think everybody's a volunteer. So
Yes,
we want to get them an inside look at a nonprofit that say, oh, wow, I can be an electrician at the Humane Society, or I can be an accountant and have a passion for serving kids. So yeah,
absolutely.
that's that idea of exposing them to real world. You don't have to be a media maker to have a position in the nonprofit world.
Absolutely.
The other thing we're doing when we put them inside that operation is, aside from the mechanics, they see how the nonprofit works mechanically, but they also see the corporate culture of a nonprofit.
Mhm.
They see people that are committed to a cause and working for more than just a paycheck. How will that benefit them when they enter the workforce? What's that gonna what kind of paved path is that gonna lead them down?
So definitely, purpose-driven people are absolutely more successful. You'll hear that in sociology and psychology. They are the ones, well, we're willing to do it for free because it's a passion. It really does drive commerce, and folks really forget about that because if five of us get together and maybe we're all carpenters, but we have a passion for um, teaching teenagers,
Right,
how to create something. There are more people when you go tell that story to, let's say, the Valeros of the world or the CPS Energies or whoever. They make a higher connection with you because you're able to articulate it better. You're able to really explain things from the technical down to the business plan. You understand, it just opens up more things in your brain. I mean, really, psychology wise, those brain cells are just firing off,
right,
and it's exciting. You can see it in the person's speech
right.
and in their eyes and in their everything. And
Yeah,
that's what's wonderful.
you hear people talk about, your passion is obvious, it shows through, and that's how that works, is because
Hmm.
you are excited, you are invested, and you are uh, more than just an advocate. I'm a true believer in
Hmm.
what I'm saying, and so yeah, that always makes your pitch a little more believable,
Absolutely.
a little more relatable.
And socially, we all want to be around happy people. We don't want to be around depressed people.
Right,
So that small group is very powerful because with their passion and purpose and translating that to others, you're going to get more people to say yes and to say, you know what, maybe I can't dedicate years, but I'm going to dedicate 6 months to you. Or maybe I'm only going to dedicate 30 days, but I can help you raise, you know, X amount of money.
sure.
And that's better than where you were yesterday.
Yeah, exactly. It's one foot in front of the other, one day at a time.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes,
Kristi,
absolutely.
thank you so much. Thanks for your time and all the information and your
Oh,
insight.
thank
I
you.
really appreciate it. You've got a unique perspective in that you have been on both sides of the nonprofit and the for-profit world, and you're a great storyteller. So yeah, I want our students to see you as this is where I could be. This is what I could be doing.
Absolutely. It's limitless. Don't worry about any glass ceilings. You just need to keep going and moving forward. And there are people who will help you. I know that I've helped many young men and women. I've made introductions, so I don't think the students should ever hesitate asking for that help, because it is out there.
Absolutely. And there are people who are eager to help.
Yes, yes.
You're
And
not, you're
thank you
not
so
imposing
much.
on them. They're eager to help. They want to help.
Yes.
All right. Thanks, Kristi. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
You bet. Take care.
You too.